Last month, I pricked my finger at home, collected a few drops of blood, and sent it off to SiPhox Health for comprehensive testing. What came back was a detailed analysis of over 50 biomarkers that revealed exactly why I'd been struggling with brain fog and low energy for months. The process was surprisingly simple, way easier than I expected, and the insights I got were incredibly detailed. I want to walk you through the entire experience in this SiPhox review, from choosing the right program to getting my results, so that you can see if SiPhox might help you figure out what's going on with your own health. So let's start with choosing which test to take. Now, because I've been dealing with brain fog and fatigue, as well as performance in the gym, which is still highly important to me, I decided to go with the ultimate program. I wanted to get the most comprehensive results. My friend Josh has been studying blood analysis, and he told me that it would be important to get some of those additional tests that are done in the ultimate program, particularly things like the more complete hormone panel, and the thyroid and nutritional markers that you only get from that ultimate plan. So that was what drove me over the edge to go with the ultimate program, even though it does cost more. And I also used ChatGPT to help me decide this. I went through the SiPhox quiz, and it led me towards suggesting the ultimate or the starter if I just wanted to kind of get in with the first test and see some basic results. But I went through and used ChatGPT to compare what would be more valuable for my own needs. Dealing with a lot of brain fog lately, my energy's been really terrible. Motivation has been a struggle, and I haven't really seen any progress in the gym lately. So I know that there's a lot going on stress-wise in my life, but I wanted to get a more complete picture, and blood testing was one of the things that I decided to do in order to help me. Budget's going to be a factor for sure when it comes to deciding which test to take, but also maybe if you've done a lot of blood testing in the past with your doctor, or you just kind of know where you're at, you can lean into some of the different panels that SiPhox offers, whether you just need those basic tests or things like the metabolic specific or the heart health or the hormone panel. You can kind of lean into which works best for you. But I wanted to get that complete picture, even if it's just to establish a baseline this year that I can then go off of if I continue to use these SiPhox tests or any other type of test. Now let's look at the cost comparisons to other tests. So the main one that I compared it to was Inside Tracker. This company, if you've looked into blood testing before, you've probably heard it advertised on podcasts, and it's got a lot of media out there promoting it. And its ultimate test looks pretty much identical to what SiPhox's ultimate test looks like. But in Canada, where I'm at, you also have to pay extra for the mobile blood draw. And even though a blood draw sounds more accurate than the finger prick test that you get with SiPhox, I don't know if there's any actual evidence to support that. It could just be my feeling on it. So SiPhox says that their testing is still very accurate still, and I was willing to give that a chance. And it came down to cost mainly for me, because the Inside Tracker test with the conversion rate to Canadian dollars was about as much as a full year of testing if I went with SiPhox's ultimate and did 2 tests per year. And I just didn't know if I wanted to spend that much on blood testing right now. And the other thing that I compared it to was the labs in Canada. The problem is getting access. If you're in generally good health, like I am, being mid 30s and not having a history of any sort of health issues, doctors will basically test for things like T4, like one of your thyroid hormones, but not the most important for addressing energy levels, and iron to assess your energy levels. And this leaves off a lot that can be missing from a more holistic view of tests that we have to pay for individually. So things like vitamin D and getting access to more comprehensive hormone testing when you're in your mid 30s is also just not that easy to do in Canada. So what comes in this box? Now, as we'll get into when I talk about the testing, they sent me 2 kits because I messed up a little bit on the first one. I'll talk about that. But these boxes include quite a few things that make it helpful for the testing. You get the cards that you will do the blood drops onto to go in for the testing. They also send you a bunch of lancets. So those are what you use to prick your finger, and things like bandages, alcohol wipes, gauze pads, as well as some helpful cards to make sure that you are getting the right amount of blood on the test card rather than overdoing it or not doing enough. The other thing they send is this kind of funny looking finger pump that is to basically improve the blood flow to your finger before you prick your finger so that it helps to draw more blood in. And so they send everything that you need. And if you have any issues, you can also schedule a blood draw call when you're doing the testing. Now, as far as the instructions go, that it says to take the test 1 to 2 hours after waking on an empty stomach. You can be hydrated, but don't eat anything else before the test because it is meant to be a fasted test. And the first time I went through the process, it was pretty frustrating. I spent close to an hour trying to squeeze my finger to get enough blood onto one of the test cards, and I didn't even complete one of the 3 that I needed for the ultimate test. It was insufficient, but when I contacted their support, they had sent me a new test kit within a couple of days so that I could retake the test. And it went much smoother the second time around because I waited a bit longer after waking, which I think helped my body to warm up and get blood flowing better. I struggled to get enough blood flowing for the test to get enough, onto those cards for it to be a sufficient test. So this brings up a question that I'm sure most people want to know about the SiPhox testing, that is maybe why it appeals to do the finger prick rather than going for a blood draw test. Does the test hurt? I'm not squeamish about needles or blood tests, but when I think of a lancet, I think of a scalpel, something sharp and pointy that is sometimes intimidating to think about. And it made me a little bit nervous at first, but this is just a finger prick. You don't see anything sharp from these little lancets, and it's very quick and feels more like a dull pinch than anything sharp. It's not really much of a problem. I do find that, at least for me, the test procedure was still pretty slow. The demonstration video from SiPhox makes it seem that it's pretty quick and easy to get the blood flowing out of your finger, but for me, it took quite a while to get enough for the samples. So while I like the convenience of at-home testing, I also don't have a problem with having blood drawn either. And, if that's going to be quicker, sometimes that's nicer to just get it over and done with. But the at-home convenience is really the most important factor, since I haven't found it very easy to get blood testing done in Canada by any doctors that, want to look at a more comprehensive panel with you. So let's look at the results of what it was like getting the results as well as my own results. So once you've done all this testing, you're ready to ship it off in the prepaid package that they give to you. And then you just have to wait for the results. For me, this took about 2.5 or 3 weeks for the results to come back. But keep in mind, I'm in Canada, and I think that their lab maybe is sent to California. So it takes a few days for travel. And I got an email about a week after I sent my samples that the lab had received them. And then I did get a few more emails about delays because the lab was busy and it was in the queue, but they were still waiting on doing the test results. So, if you're looking for a fast turnaround on results, I can only imagine that as SiPhox continues to get more popular, it's going to take longer to get your results unless they expand their network of labs and their ability to do testing. But once the results did come in, it was very telling on what was going on with some of the health markers that I didn't really expect that were leading to the symptoms like the low mood, brain fog, tiredness, and the lack of energy. So, looking through some of the results, not only does SiPhox show the results, it provides a really great summary of what each blood marker means and why it should matter and how you can improve it. So, it's very helpful with each of these cards popping open on the different markers and having the clear indicators based on the color coding of what that marker is about, why it's out of range, and helping you to figure out and put together a picture of what the action plan that you want to work on these different markers is going to look like. So, going through it, some of the things that really stood out to me was morning cortisol was really low for me, which is, I think, an indicator of, stages of burnout and not being able to have that stress response first thing in the morning. And it suggested things like getting out in direct sunlight first thing in the morning as a way to help improve morning cortisol levels. Things that also stood out was that T3 was really low for me, which is another indicator of metabolism. It's going to affect energy and something that I need to work on and improve. And then I think the most startling thing for me were the hormone levels, seeing estradiol being extremely high, as well as free androgens, total testosterone, and free testosterone being very low for me, which is not really something that I expected, but can be a factor due to stress and not sleeping that great or having deep sleep affected, because I have had a history of sleep apnea. And so these are things that, really stood out to me that I need to work on improving. And again, with suggestions on things like following the Huberman protocol and also dietary and lifestyle changes like improving stress as a way and a goal for me to try to improve these markers. And then something that did stand out as being in a good range was vitamin D. So I was happy to see that, because that's another marker of something that could be impacting energy levels. But I do regularly take vitamin D and, go for tans or get out in the sun a lot. And so it was good to see that vitamin D was actually in an optimal range or close to the optimal range. It was actually a little bit high, which I don't mind, because half of the year in Canada, it's dark and we don't get enough vitamin D from being outside as much. So that's something that I'm happy to see I was doing a good job with. So let's talk about recommendations and next steps. First off, if you're trying to make adjustments on the fly, SiPhox doesn't necessarily give you the fast results of the turnaround, at least on the first test. Maybe for my subsequent tests, it'll get to be faster. Although once you get into the routine of testing, you'll know what you're working on. And so this should give you enough time to make adjustments between tests, but expect it to, depending on where you're located, it might take a few weeks to get the results after each test. I'd suggest that you take very detailed notes of anything that you've done at the time of testing and in the window after testing, or keep your lifestyle the same until the results come in so that you can make adjustments based on your results rather than just on a gut instinct or feeling. Although most of us that are willing to, optimize our health based on blood testing are going to be pretty analytical minded and driven to do the right thing with our testing and making adjustments in our health goals and action plans anyway. So like I said, while the wait initially was long, I'll see how it goes with the next round of testing now that I know what I'm working on based on this first test. And I did select to test twice a year because I feel like that's enough, but depending on how things are going and if my mood improves, energy, I may do another test sooner, especially because of those alarmingly low hormone levels, that it might be helpful to know if I'm on the right track or if I need to go to a doctor locally and see if I can get anything further, figured out there. So I'll keep you posted on how things go. And if you want to follow along on the journey or you're looking to sort out your own health challenges, be sure to subscribe to the channel, as I will be doing follow-up videos as I go through this testing process. And if you want access to the convenience of these at-home tests to optimize your health or to help you identify any issues you're facing, you can get 25% off your SiPhox testing when you use my code, and I'll include it in the link in description. As far as I know, it's available in Canada and the US right now, so keep that in mind if you're in a different country. And let me know if you've got any other questions that I didn't address in this video, and I'll answer them when I do a follow-up to this one. Thank you as always for watching the video. And I forgot to mention that SiPhox also integrates with your wearable data. So if you want to learn more about the best type of wearable, whether it's the Apple Watch or a Ring or Whoop, I made a comprehensive review comparing those devices that explains what is the most important factor when it comes to those different devices. So you can check that video out here next.